Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Soulful Hunter Podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Mack. Through this podcast, I'm on a mission to transform lives through primal adventure and to spread my mission of mentorship as conservation. This podcast is powered by Washington Backcountry, a resource for all hunters both new and old. To find out more about Washington Backcountry, go to wabackcountry.com or search for Washington Backcountry on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. The Soulful Hunter Podcast is also proudly presented by T&K Hunting Gear. If you haven't heard about T&K, then it's about time you do. I've been using T&K gear out in the field and on hunts and have fallen in love with their stuff. T&K is veteran-owned and 100% made in America using only American-made products. All their gear is covered under a lifetime warranty with no questions asked. If it breaks or fails, they will fix it or replace it for free. T&K is your resource for bino harnesses, bow slings, and a lot more amazing gear. For more information about T&K hunting gear, go to tnkhunting.com or search for them on Facebook and Instagram. I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Freedom on and stay soulful. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Soulful Hunter Podcast. Today I got just a really cool episode for all of you with a returning guest. But before we dive into the topic of today, I just want to let you all know, if you haven't seen on our social media, Washington Backcountry and the Soulful Hunter Podcast are doing a fundraiser for Seattle Children's Hospital, trying to raise money to donate to buy so they can buy toys for all the kids there in the holiday season. They've had multiple things cut and reduced because of this coronavirus and different things. So like even kids can't see all their parents at the same time and just horrible restrictions. And so the best thing that we can do to offer our support, and we believe that you can't outgive good in this world, is to donate and just help out wherever you can. So if there's a link within the profile of our social medias, you can also go to our website at wabackcountry.com or soulfulhunter.com, as well as in the information of this episode, there's a link so you can go donate. So don't be afraid to go do that. If you can't donate financially, if you could share it within your community, that'd be a big help. All right, so moving on into today's episode, we have Ryan McMillan back to talk about everything State of the Union right now. And this is an episode that I have been excited to talk about. It's been one that's been on my mind for quite some time. And I figured there's no better guest than someone who has served this country and been a person who has stood up for freedom in what they do and what they live for, and that is Ryan McMillan of Graybow Gun Stocks. Ryan, thank you so much for coming back and joining us for another episode.
Yeah, 100%. Love being here.
So I am a huge fan of America. I guess that's the best way to put it. I love America. The 4th of July is my favorite holiday. The concept of what the Declaration of Independence stands for with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Like, my kids know that when they see an eagle fly in the sky, they yell America. I mean, there's just this is how I'm raising my community, my tribe, to love their country. And I feel like, especially in like public education, which I'm a part of, so often it's so interesting how mainstream media and education and these different platforms aren't just like completely blatant about what they push, but it's very subtle, like a serpent, and it just kind of winds through. So specifically, I remember it was Veterans Day Assembly a couple years ago, back when the Colin Kaepernick thing happened. Now, listeners, let me just put an asterisk to this episode. You might get offended by this episode because we're going to dive into topics that could be uncomfortable, could be new, could be different, but at the end of the day, knowledge is power, and it helps you make more informed decisions. So going back to this Veterans Day Assembly that we had during Colin Kaepernick taking a knee days on the sidelines of the NFL, and we had, obviously it's everyone's right to what they want to do. I have no problem with people exercising their rights. What I had an issue with was that at our assembly, because it's so mainstream culture for people to not stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, that a teacher was like, hey, should we tell them preemptively, like, it's okay if you want to not stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? And I said to myself and to the group of people I was with, I was like, no, you don't automatically give people the permission to sit down and stay silent. Or, like, yes, if you want to, but the minute that in a middle school setting, everyone is, wants to be cool or go with the mainstream, it just really rubbed me wrong. And so that's where I see society nowadays is like, and it's hard to put words to it. So I wanted to bring you on as a guest to talk about what your view of things is. I mean, before I throw it to you real quick, Ryan, I just want to say that there was a very, very powerful political cartoon that I saw when I was in high school. And it might have come out after 9/11, or I don't know exactly when it was posted, but it was this classroom with all these kids standing up for the Pledge of Allegiance and one kid sitting down with his feet on his desk. And the teacher goes, "Billy, it may be your right not to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, but let me introduce you to somebody who lost their right to stand for your freedom." And it was a Marine in a wheelchair with no legs.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I was like, wow, let's just check ourselves and really rally the troops and understand what it is we believe in and what we are standing for. So that was a lot of just kind of threw out right there. Ryan, what is your take on the state of affairs in America and everything that's going on?
Well, I think we're definitely headed down a bad path. One of the things that I was thinking about today was, even though I do feel like we're headed down a bad path, I think there's almost no doubt that we can't just naturally continue this way. Like, for instance, the media. I think I talked about something yesterday in one of the posts I did, and the media is taking it upon themselves to kind of just say whatever they want. There's an agenda, and there's no journalistic integrity anymore. This seems pretty clear. And I think for me, I want to personally just believe that the media has just kind of lost its way, but it's not truly evil. I'm not really sure where I stand on that, but I don't think that the media can continue on this path for too much longer before it completely implodes. Which, to think about that in a bigger setting, in a bigger picture, outside of the media, as a country as a whole, I think the same thing. I mean, I think, it's like a pendulum, or, the country and the way it swings, it's a pendulum. And eventually, I really do think it's going to come back to the middle. I think once, the left, I mean, we're talking political here, once the left kind of gets its way enough and the media is on the left, and we're seeing that there seems to be some voter fraud. I mean, we don't know if it's enough to change the election, but there's definitely voter fraud. So, and this is all on the left. There's a lot of corruption, and this stuff does get exposed in a free society. The social media outlets, they are getting exposed for being really left-leaning and trying to suppress our freedom of speech and trying to tell us things that they believe, but we don't believe. Every post that you post that's political, they feel the need to tell you what the mainstream media has come to the conclusion of. And it's like this, I don't know if it's true collusion between the media and social media outlets and the political people. I just think they're all aligned ideologically, and that they just are kind of working together. Back to the point is, I just don't think it lasts that long. Let's just say the elections stand, 70 million people still don't believe in the crap that, those people are touting. And you just can't run a society that way. I think it all implodes on them. I don't know when that's going to happen. And of course, we got to stand our ground and do everything we can to fight for freedom. But I also don't think it's going to result in a civil war or anything. I really don't believe that. I think that the implosion of that political ideology is going to happen long before there's a potential true civil war. There may be some skirmishes in the streets, and I get that, but I just don't see how an ideology that corrupt and that negative, and just that in a way they say one thing and do the other. I don't see how that lasts. I really don't. And I look at it from my perspective. I'm a conservative, and I guess you're here, and I'm just saying it. I'm glad I truly believe I'm on the right side. Not all conservatives are perfect, but I think the ideology is right. And I think that what we've seen, and I also don't think all Democrats are bad either. I think there's a lot of great Democrats. So I just think that the people, the elites, the people in power, the media, social media outlets, politicians have gotten to a place to where they feel like they're indestructible, and that has to go away. And I think that's the implosion I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you share there, because living in the state of Washington, we have a governor, Jay Inslee, who is a failed presidential candidate. He didn't make it into the primary, and he's a guy I didn't vote for. I'm not a fan of him politically. The person he's running against, Lauren Culp, here in the state of Washington, is a sheriff. He is a small business owner, and a lot of people called him like a mini Trump, but he believes in law and order. He's a constitutionalist, which is how I would define myself. I'm a conservative who leans more towards the libertarian side, but I understand that libertarianism cannot sustain in this type of environment. So I'm the constitutionalist. Like, I truly believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Small government, bigger community, that type of thing. Well, here it is. He puts down the state. He puts the state in lockdown. And a lot of people say, well, it's not really a lockdown. It's like, well, more or less it is when the government is telling businesses what they can and cannot do. It's an overreach. And so here we are in the state of Washington with one of the largest companies in the world, Amazon, just now bursting at the seams with business because everyone's forced to order things online and stay home. And so you're just feeding the beast there, while all the mom and pop shops and all the different community stores and restaurants are just getting destroyed by political policy. And here we are just feeding into this big corporation, big tech, so ultimately, people don't know how to find and source their own stuff. This goes back to where I love bring the hunting aspect in, is like having the skill set to provide for your own family. I think one of the downfalls of America and society currently is their lack of interest to find the truth. And, so often people are just told things and they take it at face value. Be like, oh, well, the news says it's so. Well, how often is the weatherman wrong on the news? Right? All the time.
Every day.
So when you see a video which has circulated social media where every single news station across the country does this little bit by bit and they're all saying the exact same words, something is going on there. Something's fishy. It doesn't smell right. And listen, it's not about Republican versus Democrat, conservative versus liberal. However, when I am talking about America, I'm talking about the rights and liberties that we have, the Constitution. So here we are getting censored, if you were to say anything on Twitter, which is a super sweet, if you guys aren't on Twitter, get on Twitter. Don't even, if you have to make a personal account or you want to make like a incognito account, whatever, go on Twitter and start following some of these politicians. Start following people that you agree with and disagree with, and you're going to really start seeing how this world is getting shaped. So my question to you, Ryan, is you being a former Navy SEAL who took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States, both against foreign and domestic, what does that mean to you in current state of affairs? And like, now that you're out of the military, does that oath leave? Does it end? Or do you just now feel like you get to carry this on in your everyday civilian life as well?
Well, that's a good question. And even just as recently as Veterans Day, as I was thinking about it, I've kind of formulated some different thoughts about what the veteran means to the United States. I mean, when I got out of the military, I remember going to, I'm from Arizona, so I was in Virginia when I was in the SEAL teams, and I came back to Arizona, and I attended my first football game, a Cardinals football game, since I was a kid. And obviously, you get to the game, and right before the game, you stand up and they do the national anthem. And boy, was it embarrassing for me because I couldn't keep my tears in. Right, that was really the first time I remember going, really realizing how much that flag, the symbol of America, meant to me. Because when you're in and you're like, there's just so much going on that you don't stop to think about the value of America and what you're really fighting for a lot of times, especially when you're at war. We're just so busy, focused on doing our job. And as time has gone on, and I'm looking backwards and trying to figure out, what America really stands for and what it is and what I fought for. And I realized that this Veterans Day, as I was thinking about it, I realized that veterans' jobs, well, let me back up. Veterans themselves are what they are the embodiment, a human embodiment of America, because they know more than anybody else what this country really means, and what it means to have to potentially die, or see your buddies die, or lose a limb, or whatever, for the idea of this country. And as I thought about that, man, I was like, what is going to save America going forward are those veterans, because nobody else, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but I really don't think anybody else really has that level of appreciation for the flag that we do, because of the service that we did. And I don't know if I can split out combat veterans, or if I split out, veterans of war, not war, but it doesn't really matter. But especially veterans who've been to war and who've seen their buddies die, and who've were fighting for, freedom, of this country or other countries or other lands, really have a deep rooted appreciation for what this country is. And I think on the other spectrum, these young kids, they don't know anything. They've never been anywhere. They like socialism. They think socialism, all the crap that all of us know that's BS. It is frustrating. It is frustrating for us to see. But anyway, back to the point. I think veterans themselves, and it's hit me like a ton of bricks, but veterans themselves are really like the gatekeepers of America. We have the patriots. We call patriots. That's anybody who's really kind of conservative thinking, I guess, and loves America and Constitution. That's a group, but within that, the veterans, I think, really have that baseline of understanding and knowledge of what this country means. And I think that means a lot. If you lose your population of people who care for the country, if that population goes away, then what do you have? You just have anarchy, I think. Yeah, I really do. So I think veterans are important going forward.
Man, hearing you say that puts me at ease, puts me at peace. and I just seriously thank you for serving, and thank you for loving our country that much. Are you so this part of this podcast is touching topics that people might be aware of, but they might not want to talk about. Are you familiar with the Q movement? You ever
QAnon or whatever?
Yeah, QAnon and all that.
I mean, I've heard of it. I don't really know much about it.
Okay, so all you listeners out there, knowledge is power. Make your own decision. However, if you go to like QAnon.pub, QAnon.pub, it's one of the websites where you can access what is actually on the board. And there's all these Q drops that started back in October 2017, and the last one was November 12th, 2020. They happen sporadically, and some people say it's military intelligence operation. There's all sorts of different things going on. Some of it believes it's tied in with General Flynn and Sidney Powell, and who knows. The point of that I do want to say is that within the QAnon movement, they have specifically talked about how this is a military operation, that there's no other way to save our country than through the military. And that being said, it's easy to jump to conclusions that people were like, well, Civil War, the military's got to come in, National Guard's been called up in, I think, 13 states already, all these different things. But what you just said is that it is the people, the veterans, who are going to save this country, because they understand what freedom is and why they stand for it and why they're willing to die for it. And so it's really interesting. We've talked about a buddy of mine who's a former Navy SEAL as well. And there's a movie, which this might have been when you were in the military, 12 Strong, the 12 Navy SEALs that fought off the Taliban up in Afghanistan, if you're familiar with that.
I'm recalling the name, but was it about like
A small group of operators that got surrounded by just an onslaught of enemy combatants, and those 12 people were able to take them all out and survive.
was that early on in Afghanistan?
I think so. I believe so.
Yeah, that was yeah.
So the point of that statement is we have all these combat veterans in America that know how to operate. They're operators. These people, whether or not it comes to it, and I'm not trying to talk actual civil war, and I'm definitely not trying to fearmonger. But the point is that if you took Antifa or whatever domestic terrorism group that you want, and you brought in a bunch of old operators that know how to work together, dude, there's not going to be a battle. Like it's over in an instance. And I think that's what people forget is just how much these veterans love America and want to support it and make sure that it continues.
But what's our real power is not that we can operate. I mean, all this stuff that veterans have been through, combat veterans, Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, the Special Forces have been through. I mean, the guys from Antifa literally live in their basements. It's not even fair. But what our real power is that we're smarter than them. They're not very smart. They think that they're going to take to the streets and do something, and destroying small businesses is going to be their path to success. I posted something a couple weeks ago, maybe, and it had to do with the talk about all this civil war, and what I found is a lot of the people who talk about it are, I don't know who they are, but they're not veterans. Most of them are not veterans. And if you look at who's actually, what the veterans are saying is they're saying we're not even close to civil war. There's a different way to win this, and it's not with our guns, and that's absolutely true. And what I encourage people is to maybe go, who think that we're close to civil war, or talking about, being some, awesome operator. Why don't you go follow a couple of veterans, combat veterans, and say and follow their lead. Like, they're the ones who really know what war is like. They know what war looks like, when it's going to happen, how to navigate through it. We're not there. So what we have on our side, I think, is the fact that we need to not be emotional about this, like Antifa and BLM, where they take to the streets. They're all emotional. Something happens, someone gets killed. We don't even know the details, and they're already writing. That's an emotional reaction that needs to stay out of, that conservative libertarian movement. And it does for the most part. We see it all the time. We see all the kind of joking memes that, like, when is the gun industry supposed to start writing, or when are conservatives supposed to start writing? Well, it's a joke because we don't write. When things go bad for us, we do it in a different way. We do it through legal means, or we do it through our own ability to reason. And that's what we need to keep in mind. We need to keep in mind that there's a long way of reasoning our way through this and being smarter. And when you do that, when you just don't take to the streets and start destroying things, you win people over along the way. What we saw was the riots and the defund the police movement and all that crap that hurt the Democrats. There's no doubt. There's study after study that killed the Democrats. And that's what happens when you become emotional to a problem. So we got to stay calm. We got to stay focused. We got to be smarter than them, and we got to win because our ideas are better. And that's it. And that's what will happen. I mean, we've been doing that in America for 250 years or so. We can keep doing it. That's the way to do it. It's not the way, we're not at a civil war yet.
Yeah. And I just want to reiterate real quick for all you listeners out there. It doesn't matter what side you voted for. We love you regardless. We as an I, and I'm speaking for you, Ryan, if you don't mind, we will stand for you regardless. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing I want people to take away from this podcast, is that what we stand for is America and the Constitution and what it brings for people, which is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I'm willing to stand with you, and Ryan has already stood for you even if you disagree with me. But don't get offended by this podcast just because we're talking about things that you might not agree with or like or enjoy or whatever. Don't just shut it off. If we all thought the same, this world would not be healthy. We'd be robots, and that we would be under slavery. And it is the opposing views that breeds strength, that brings perspective and brings health. It's healthy to have differing perspectives. If we only looked at, and quoting my brother Lucas, if we only looked at a diamond from one side, we'd only know it from that one side. But because we can look at a diamond from all different angles, that's what brings the beauty to it. And so the beauty of humanity is when we do have differing opinions. However, my opinion is that I would hope brings life, not death. And there's power in the tongue. It has the power to, bring life and death, and to speak words of positivity, love, and challenge people on their ideas and allow them to reach their own conclusions. So, for example, we have a presidential election that didn't go the way 70 million Americans voted. And one of the things is that there is this idea of voter fraud. Whether or not you like Donald Trump or you do not like Donald Trump, don't you believe that in the fairness of good ethics, if there is a question raised of cheating, that it's due diligence to look into it? And I think that is one of the things where the mainstream media is so quick to call out, like, oh, Biden won. I remember on Twitter, the day of the election, November 3rd, the New York Times posted a Twitter tweet. They tweeted out the statement saying, just remember the media has the power to call who is the president-elect. And I was like, that is straight lies. And 30 minutes later, they deleted that tweet. But if that's what the New York Times is posting, and you have all these media outlets just saying, that's disinformation, or that's Russia collusion, or whatever it is, we spent 3.5 years, to quote you, Ryan, I think you tweeted this yesterday. It says, social media relies on mainstream media outlets to fact check our posts. The same media outlets that covered the Russian hoax for 3.5 years, the same media that was sued for false reporting and slander of a minor, and the same media that refuses to cover indisputable evidence of voter fraud. If all you're doing is listening to information being told to you and believing it, you're already blinded. And that's where society wants you, where this quote unquote like darkness wants you. They want you to not think. They want you to not search for answers. And I'm a Bible believer. In the Bible, it says, "Study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth." And the point is that you need to go search out answers, not just sit back and allow you to be just fed it. So, what do you have to say to Americans that are listening to this podcast?
Oh, that's a broad question. Let's see. Well, first, I get this sense. I'm going to try to look at everything as much as I can independently outside of parties. I mean, of course, I have my beliefs, but I really do think that the extreme left is a real problem. And part of the reason why, unlike the extreme right, the extreme right is pretty much insignificant. Quite honestly, it's really insignificant. But the extreme left is not insignificant. They actually continue to drive the Democratic leaders farther left. I mean, you can see it with Biden himself. I mean, he picked Kamala Harris, which was, I think, voted the most left.
She's voted the most liberal, left-leaning senator.
So then you got AOC in that group, and they're touting social. You got Bernie Sanders, so they're up moving left. Anyways, the point being, what I want to see is I want to see Democrats and Republicans figuring out and realizing that we're not on a different team. Yes, we can we need to debate, and that's how good politics and good policies come about. But when you get so far to one side or the other, and you're not even listening to the other side, and you're talking about socialism, and you're talking about things that you're willing to cheat to get power, you're doing things outside of what is good for the country. That's where it becomes a real problem. What's really bothering me is the fact that the mainstream media and social media don't even want to look at the potential fraud. There's obviously fraud. We know this, right? I mean, there's been enough cases and there's enough evidence that there is fraud. Whether it's enough to overturn the election, we don't know. But the fact that mainstream media is making a joke out of it when they are confronted to actually address it, they make a joke out of it, and otherwise they refuse to address it. It's really telling, right? And that's what you see is that happening situation over situation. What did we see when the riots? These are mostly peaceful protests. Okay, 93% of all protests are peaceful. Okay, well, what about the 7%? What about 7% that are literally destroying America? Why don't you focus? They're ignoring it because of politics, right? They're ignoring the real issues, the really bad things that are destroying America, and trying to focus on the things that aren't. They're saying, but those things that aren't destroying America are kind of like what do they call it? They're inert compared to this other little things that are literally destroying. So that question was kind of broad. I just want people to come back like you to the Constitution and say we have rules and laws for a reason, right? If you don't get your way this time, that's fine. That's how this works. It usually goes back and forth, Democrat, Republican. Very, very few times do we go Democrat for a long period of time, Republican. Usually it's back and forth, okay? It's always switching. And when you start to try to subvert the system like the Democrats are talking about with stacking the courts, it always comes back to bite them, right? So what's the other thing the Democrats did where it used to take 60 votes out in the Senate to confirm a justice, and when Obama was in, they changed that to 50. Well, in long-term perspective, that was a terrible thing for the Democrats to do, right? Because what happened? We just got 3 justices in, but they're looking at this, kind of this narrow window of, hey, let's we're not winning right this second. Let's win now, and then they ram something through, and it changes the course of history in a way that they never saw. So, let's get back to reasoning with each other. Let's get back to being able to just have dialogue with each other and not going so far off the deep end that, let's call out. Let's even people on their own side. This is what I want to do. I call people out even on the conservative, Republican, pro-gun people all the time. Like, dude, no, this is not how I think we should be going forward. Because what I think is more important to me is making sure that my team is organized best so that we can win. And you think the Democrats would do that too, but they're just all over the place, and it's hard to corral the chaos they have over there. And you would hope that someone would say, hey, Democrats, lay off the crap. I think there was one senator who was literally in tears because she lost because of all the defunding police rhetoric, all the socialism rhetoric, right? So maybe they're starting to see that over there. But I think if we all police ourselves, and one of the things that I've decided to do as an individual, when I talk, I don't just talk bad about, I want to talk positively as much as I can, but I also want to be critical of my own beliefs. So.
Yeah. The inward reflection leads to outward correction, right? It's very easy for people to be like, hey, this is what's wrong with you, without turning and looking in the mirror and be like, okay, so what's wrong with me? I totally agree, and I support you in that. We need to look at ourselves. We need and understand what brought us to believe what we believe. Why is it that we believe what we do? Because I see, I'm going to talk about the indoctrination system of public education. I pay dues, union dues, to my union, and my union supports candidates for political positions that I do not support. Mm-hmm. And so this union is already automatically voting one way and taking my money and pushing it one way that I don't agree with. And then if you hire a lot of these teachers, you hire them out of higher education. Well, if public education indoctrinates, this idea of America is inherently racist, systematically racist, broken, all this different things, and then you send them to college, and they have this whole, you got to go to college, you got to go to college. You don't have to go to college, and a lot of people are successful in this world without going to college, and a lot of people that go to college end up getting in massive debt and being a slave to the system.
Yep.
And here they are pumping teachers, kids that want to be teachers, into the system that just indoctrinates them further and then pushes them back. And it's like this vicious cycle of constantly putting people out that believe a certain ideology. Now, it's okay to think something, but the minute that you start pushing your personal beliefs on people in a system of like higher up to subservient, a teacher to a child doesn't know one way or the other, and here you are, a person that they trust and respect, and then you're saying this and this and this about the country, or I can't believe our president is doing this. There's a teacher in Seattle and made the national news that he was telling his students that Trump was a racist.
Yeah.
And that is a very specific statement that you're making to children and impacting the way that they see the world. So
I think it's ignorance. I think people like that really just, I think they're intellectually, how do I put it? I just don't think I think it's ignorance, because, for example, I've had to talk to my kids about politics recently. I didn't know anything about politics until I was really in my 20s. But I had to talk to them because, when they interact with people online, my kids are between 9 and 14. I have 4 kids between 9 and 14. So they interact with people and they see things and political ads all over the place. They all hear it, right? And so you get to the point where the kids are repeating these things and you're like, you don't even know what you're saying, really, So then you have to say, okay, sit down with them and talk to them about what mom and dad believe. Like, who cares what an ad says? Like, it's all a game in a way, don't listen to that. Like, what you need to listen to at this age is you need to listen to mom and dad about what we believe. And what we told them is that this is why we believe what we believe. This is why we're voting for who we're voting for. You need to know that because this is how you're being raised as far as the ideology that we stand behind. We don't stand behind a candidate. We stand behind an ideology. And then there's a candidate who embodies that, right? Hopefully.
Hopefully, yep.
But at the end, you say, guys, if you grow up and you feel like this is not how you want to vote, or this is not the political party that you're interested in, you guys can do whatever you want. You guys can be whatever you want. Like, just because mom and dad vote one way doesn't mean that you guys have to. Do what you want. Go out and experience things. Go out and figure it out for yourself.
Yeah.
And I think in the long run too, for people who do that, when they don't try to force some political ideology on their kids or on students, you end up with a better result with your kids then go, okay, I'm not forced something. I'm going to go out and figure it out for myself. And a lot of times they'll fall back on how they grew up and they say, oh, now I realize why mom and dad were that way. And that's how I grew up and that's how I want to be. But what I say it's ignorance for these teachers is because what happens is they're kind of forced into this position to think a certain way. And when they get old enough to realize, well, I remember that teacher back there, she never gave us an option of how to think. She told us this is how we should think. Trump's a racist, this and that. And now they rebel. Kids rebel from that type of talk.
Yeah.
So,
it's so interesting. Now, talking about not pushing ideas and values on people, I had a teacher assistant. This is he was an 8th grader going to be a freshman. Obama was president. And I remember he asked me one time about politics. And so as soon as a student asks you, then it's, a little bit more acceptable to share some stuff. Well, I started to tell them exactly what you said. Is like, before you vote one way or the other, you need to understand what it is that you believe and what you stand
Yeah.
for. Because you know it's amazing. You don't even hear about abortion anymore. Like back in the 90s at presidential debates, it was all about abortion. All about abortion. Is it, are we pro-life or pro-choice? Pro-life or pro-choice? That didn't even get brought up in presidential debates this year. And it's in that solely is something that people like will fight to the bitter end for. And yet you have the youth of America, they don't even think of it like that concept. They don't
Yep.
think about the future and the different reasons of why people believe that life begins at inception versus why life begins at first breath, or and that's different religions that look at it differently. And so, for me, I personally will always vote Second Amendment. That is my stance. The Second Amendment is the linchpin for the First and
Yep.
and all our
Yep.
freedoms. The minute that you take away the weapons is the minute the government can tell you exactly what you can and cannot do. And that's not a world I want to live in. That doesn't go with my freedoms, my personal inalienable rights as a human to make decisions for my own self. The other thing I want to talk with you about is this concept of the government or certain government officials and big tech believing that they know how to keep you safe more than you knowing how to keep yourself safe. Do you being in Arizona, do you see that a lot?
Well, you might believe that, since the swing state this year was Arizona, you might think that there's a lot of that in Arizona. But the fact is that I've never seen Arizona, and I live in Phoenix, which is a metropolitan area, which metropolitan areas are typically blue. I've never seen so much support for a candidate ever in my life. There was a 93-mile long car parade, vehicle parade, and they went on every weekend for the entire, like a month before the election. I've never seen so much support for a candidate in my life. But of course, we all see it. We're all connected to this, to the bigger world, and we all see the big tech companies trying to. I don't know. I always give people a lot of benefit of the doubt, right? Like, I want to believe that there's something within their business that requires them, like from a liability standpoint, that they can't let people go too far, right? And they have to kind of, even though there's an element of free speech that they need to keep, there's an element beyond that that they don't want to be liable. That's what, first of all, so you got to think about that. But at the same time, there's a lot of things out there that don't fall under the category of being dangerous to anybody other than they might be offensive to people who don't agree with that. And it's getting more and more out of control, there's no doubt. I mean, one of the things that's driving me nuts is every time I post something that has anything to do with politics, there's a little button on the bottom. We've all seen it on Instagram.
Oh yeah.
That tells you, oh, well, you may be saying this, but here's what the facts are. Well, the facts, whose facts are they? The mainstream media's facts? I mean, what did they say? Convenience store sushi has a better rating than the mainstream media does.
Yep.
So it's you're fact checking what we're saying with a group of people that nobody trusts. It's a total weird world we live in right now. I don't even know how to put it all together. All I know is that from an individual standpoint, there's absolutely no doubt that our freedoms are being infringed on. Now, here's the weird part about it, and this really needs some discussion, because these social media companies are private entities, and they never before have we had a private entity that had to do so much directly with one of our constitutional rights, right? So freedom of speech. So we never had to worry about it. We never had to cross that boundary. So private entities should be, and I truly believe this, private entities should be able to do what they want to do. It's their business, right? It's their business. They should be able to kind of control it the way they want to control it. And most business owners control their businesses the way that the people drive it, right? And the CEOs and the owners just kind of make sure it's going within that direction. But because we have such it's become such a big platform for discussion and communication. You start to cross over into this world of, is it violating our freedoms, First Amendment freedoms? And so you've got this crossover between public and private sector that really needs to be ironed out. Like, on one hand, it's easy to say, well, the businesses should be able to do what they want, and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram are businesses. So if they kick me off for having conservative views, is that within their rights? Probably. But also, how do we deal with this, with the rights that we have as Americans? I don't think we've ever faced anything like this before, and it really needs to be ironed out.
I totally agree. And I've had to face this firsthand, which thank the good Lord that he's covered me in this, but being a wedding DJ. So being in the wedding industry, and especially in a state, now, by the way, listeners, I'm not making any sort of statement right here other than this. In the wedding industry, you don't always know if it is a man and woman, man and man, female and female, of who's getting married when you get hired. So there's been a couple Supreme Court cases, one in the state of Washington and one in the state of Colorado, with a florist and a cake maker, a baker, about do they have the right to serve whoever they want, right? You have this concept of no shirt, no shoes, no service that hangs on restaurant doors. So, and then this got struck down in the Supreme Court, saying that businesses do not have the right to discriminate against people. So that was right then and there, freedom of speech. Who you are, you do not have the power to get discriminated by business. So it took away the power from the business. And here you have Section 230 within the Constitution. I believe the Constitution is talking about, here is social media censoring a specific type of group, and the government not saying that's wrong and holding them accountable. So you have two different sides of it. Is, do you want businesses to be able to make their own decisions of who they serve and who they cater towards, or do you want government to have that control? And then if government has that control, do they then use it for good, evil, or how is it used?
Yeah. I mean, personally, I would always err on the side of keeping it in the private sector, even though we're seeing these companies ban and censor, let's say conservative views. I think there's always an opportunity for that builds an opportunity for other platforms to exist that service that other group that's being marginalized, right? Well, when you put it in the government's hands, there's a lot of, you don't always get that. There's no competition for the government. I very rarely would lean towards the government to regulate something like that over a private industry, because private industry has a natural way of working those things out, where the government has a forceful way typically of working those things out, or could lead to force, which I think is bad. So as you see, there's other social media sites popping up, like Parler. I think it's a terrible site. If you're listening, which you're not, I'm sure. Do some work on your site, because it sucks.
It's horrible. I started a Parler account probably back in like August or something like that, and I was like, dude, this is brutal. I don't like using this.
Like, people are using it. Conservatives are using it right now because it's like it's anti-Instagram and anti-Facebook, but it's garbage. You guys need to you guys could have something really good if you had something good, but you don't. So the other thing I would say to that is, one of the things that really I like, is my personality. I would love to beat Instagram and Facebook on their own platform.
Oh yeah.
That's my thing. Like, people are like, oh, I'm out of here. Well, you know what? I'm going to keep fighting these guys, because they've got to play this fine line between not going overboard, because if they go overboard, even their own supporters, even their own people on the left are going to say, oh, I don't know. I mean, there will come a point in time where it's so much that everybody starts to say, hey, let's stop this. So I would love to beat them, on their own platform. I think that would be great. And when I say beat them, I don't mean that, I guess, literally. I mean, what I mean is, I would love to
beat the system of it.
beat the system of them trying to silence us, and then people just fighting back and say, if you want to exist, if you want to continue to exist, you need to, have some kind of I don't know, leadership guidance, board of directors that can see both sides and not just one side, and feed them that way, where, they kind of come and say, okay, now we were a little over the top, and beat them intellectually rather than, move on to a different platform.
I always joked around with my buddy Jeff Winslow out in North Dakota. So if you're listening, Jeff, this should make you chuckle, but he's a big, strong dude. And I was like, dude, it's always way more fun and enjoyable to dominate someone mentally than it is physically.
Oh, sure.
And he's like, oh, I don't know. So, but going back to what you're saying, it is so, dude, we are in the most wild of times. We are in the greatest time alive right now. And if people would just take a step back and enjoy it for what it is, we are at a turning point, a precipice in history right here and right now. And there's a reason why everyone, that's a quotation, that's a royal everyone. I would say the liberal left hated the fact that Donald Trump used Twitter before he was president and throughout his presidency, because what Twitter is, and I encourage every listener to start a Twitter account. What Twitter is it's a digital battlefield, because mainstream media, when you hear stuff and read stuff in the newspaper, and when you see it on the news, on television, it's already been filtered by so many different perspectives. The minute that someone tweets something out is straight from the source. And so whether or not Twitter wants to say, well, this is disinformation or whatever, it is a way for you to take the knowledge and then dig in deeper. It's straight from the horse's mouth itself. There's no filter. And if you want to start diving into being more aware socially and politically and all this stuff, take to Twitter, and you're going to be really blown away with what you find. And I'm not talking about what's trending or what Twitter recommends for you. I'm talking about, go ahead and search out people. Look up General Flynn, follow him, follow Trump, follow Biden, follow Kamala Harris, follow Jay Inslee, follow all these different people. And with that, see how they are taking and treating social media, because it's a real interesting platform right now. And like you said, let's beat them at their own game. So one of the things that I want to bring up for people in case they don't know is, why are memes starting to be so popular? Everyone creates these graphics, and whether it's a joke or a parody or whatever, is because Facebook fact checkers and Twitter fact checkers could not decipher a meme. So you could put information into a picture and push it out without it getting censored. And that is one of the biggest things for people today. And so if you're wondering, why is the world gone to memes? That is why. It's really, dude, it's a digital battlefield, man. It's so cool.
It is interesting. There's a lot of crap out there. There is a lot of crap. And what I see a lot of times too, I'm not a huge on Twitter, but I hear it on Twitter is the worst, is, the people with their comments, right? And, the non-thoughtful comments and things like that. And one of the things I say, and I don't know how this sounds to people, but I say it anyway. If I get a comment that is an emotional rant that has no real basis in fact, I usually just say, if you're going to say something intelligent. And the reason why I say I don't mean that as a negative. I mean that because I don't want to be involved in a page or whatever that is just people getting emotionally upset about something that they don't believe in. Whether they, and most of the time, the reason why people get upset is because they don't know. They've been told something, they don't have the facts, and they haven't been able to reason through it themselves, and they're just acting on emotion. And so, I want to be able to interact in a place where there are intelligent conversations, or at least thoughtful conversations. So I've even caught myself, like, I have that saying to myself before I comment on somebody's, if you're going to say something intelligent. So that way I don't get caught in my own emotional, thoughts about, oh, you're just wrong. No, say something meaningful, say something that the person can engage in, that we can talk about. Um, that way, like we don't get spun off into these, you see it all the time, these emotional tangents where people go down this rabbit hole of like personal attacks. It's like, what are we even like? That has nothing to do with what we're talking about here. Let's talk about what's been posted and debate it.
Yeah, I totally agree. You tweeted out something this week because I follow you on Twitter. I'm a big J Mac is a huge Ryan Mac fan, big McMillan fan.
Yeah.
You tweeted, I forget the exact how you said it because my internet ironically just went down. So I have your Twitter page pulled up and now I can't even access the tweet. But it reminded me of what William Wallace said in the movie Braveheart, where he's like,
Yeah.
all men die, not all men truly live. And you tweeted something to that effect. And it's like, start being concerned with the present moment that you're in and actually making the most of each and every situation and stop being concerned about dying. And I found that so beautiful. Like everything the Soulful Hunter stands for was wrapped up within your tweet. And I loved it. And I reposted it on my social media and I was like, yeah, Ryan, you are the man. And this is also why I wanted to schedule this episode is, ladies and gentlemen, if the government was so concerned about your health, then they would change the way the food is delivered in this country. They would get involved in what you could and could not eat. To mandate a mask to say, this is for your safety. Well, if they really believed in your safety, they'd be doing a lot of other things. So with us, instead of being so concerned about this concept of dying, and we start putting it into the concept of living each moment, it's going to revolutionize everyone's life.
Was that the one where I said the same people that are concerned about dying are also the same people who are not willing to live, but are also afraid to live? Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah.
Yes.
The same people who are afraid to die. The people who are afraid to die are the same people who are afraid to live.
Yep.
Yeah, and you see, I saw a meme go around. There was a lady holding up a flag saying, "Is freedom really more important than safety?" And I thought, oh, that's not many people out there. That might just be one ill-informed person. And then I commented on Doug Ducey. He's the governor of Arizona. I commented on one of his LinkedIn posts, and basically someone got back and said, it basically said the same thing. She's like, you wouldn't be so like gung-ho about freedom if you know all these people who have died. And then she listed off all these people. I guess maybe she knew who died from COVID, which I've known people who died from COVID too. And she basically made the statement of, is freedom really more important than safety? And I just thought to myself, like, people really do think this way. Like, I can see from a very surface level how that statement may sound good to people. Like, oh yeah, well, you got to be safe, and like the freedom will come next. But if you're not safe, but it's a really bad way to live. It's a bad way to think, because as soon as you start saying, well, I want to be safe before free, then your freedom goes away. And the only safety you have is now slavery. Mm-hmm. And, it's not a way to live under slavery, and I would just caution anybody who believes in that ideology to really think about what that means. Look at what has happened, even just within the last 100 years, not even talking about the amount of atrocity that's happened over the last thousands of years, but just over the last 100 years in the Soviet Union, in Russia, and in Germany, and those places where hundreds of millions of people have died at the hands of their own government. I think we forget that. I think people forget that. And they say, well, in my lifetime, there hasn't been some kind of mass genocide, at least reported. I mean, there has been in Africa and stuff, but people forget that, and they think, well, the government's going to take care of me. And what I say is, take care of yourself. Don't rely on the government to take care of you. Make sure that the most important thing to you is freedom. Make sure that you understand that taking care of yourself and having responsibility for yourself and accountability for yourself, that's what matters. Don't rely on the government or anybody else to take care of you. Your happiness, Your safety is your own responsibility. You live that way, and life gets really easy. Yes, there are dangers in life. We get into a car just about every day and we drive. There's all kinds of things that kill us, but you can't be afraid to live.
Yeah. Get busy living or get busy dying. I think
That's
that
right.
would something like to that effect was said in the movie Shawshank Redemption. And
Yeah.
it's true. It's in my personal life, I rather die a free man than live a slave. Not because
Yeah.
I don't want to be a slave and all that, but because I value my freedom that much. It's
I've been. Oh, go ahead.
no,
Sorry.
oh, I just to like solidify that statement. It's not that I compare one over the other. It's that I value something so strongly.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it's time for people to reflect and be like, what do I really stand for? What do I really believe in? So go ahead.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say?
I've been thinking about this saying for a couple of weeks, but I haven't really done. I haven't posted it because I don't want it to be taken the wrong way. But I've been thinking about, if I'm going to die, I want to die with a gun in my hand. And what that really means is I don't want to be disarmed before I get, like there's meaning behind it. And I don't know how to portray it exactly, but I don't. It. One of the things that sparked that thinking for me was, a couple of years ago there was a senator or governor. I think he was a senator out of California, Swalwell maybe. He's like, what do you need your guns for? The military has nukes and like, and I thought to myself, well, I think there's a couple things I think about that, but specifically, I don't care if the government has 100% chance of killing me. I want to go down fighting. I'm not just going to sit there and take it. And anybody who says they're going to sit there and take it, don't buy a gun because the government is going to cream you anyway. Well, that's not. I'll take my odds with a gun rather than just sitting there getting. And so that was my thought process behind that. And obviously, it expands more about our rights to be able to own a gun and what it means to be able to defend ourselves and what it means to be able to hunt and to be self-sustainable. And so it encompasses a lot. But I really thought about that, and I thought it was a unique, and I'm still trying to put it together. Maybe one of these days I'll put it out there. But I didn't want it to be taken the wrong way, like I'm trying to say that it's Civil War time, because I could see how that could be portrayed.
Yeah, like it's a call to arms right there.
Like it's a call to arms, right?
Yeah.
So.
No, I totally get it, and I think people need to hear this stuff. It is. I didn't realize how important an AR pistol is until all these different things went down. And I was like, oh man, there's a reason why I wish I would have built a short barreled Armalite rifle, which is AR, not assault rifle, because assault is a verb. It's an action word. It's not a noun. So there's a reason why all of a sudden, it was only 80 years ago that the Nazis and the brown shirts of the Nazi regime came and removed people from their homes and said, it's for your safety. We're going to bring you over here. Hey, you get on this train. You go to this neighborhood. In the state of Washington, and one of the mandates that Governor Inslee created is that with the contact tracing of COVID-19, that if you do not have the appropriate type of space within your house to quarantine, that they can come to your house and remove you and put you in a safe location. Oh, that sounds very familiar. And we're so easy to forget. So easy to forget as a society that, remember, this lockdown was only supposed to last 15 days and to slow the curve, not to overwhelm hospitals. And yet, here we are. You're not allowed to own a restaurant and run your restaurant at full capacity. Now it's only 25% capacity. Oh, you're not allowed to go to you're not allowed to go to the gym and be healthy to release mental stress, physical stress, emotional stress. But we're going to cage you up at home and allow you to suffer. I've heard a statistic. I don't know exactly the numbers, but suicides have gone up exponentially in 2020.
Mm-hmm. Suicides, drug addictions, depression. Last I looked, the actual number of deaths in 2020, based upon the last 2 years, we actually have lower death rate this year overall than we have the last 2 years. and that's trending to be the case towards the end of the year. So it's all just a facade. One of the things that really kind of struck me was when I was driving down the road and I saw a billboard in Arizona, and it says, "Your mask protects me and my mask protects you." And I really got thinking about that, because what that really insinuates is the idea that if you don't wear your mask, you're killing other people. I mean, people, pro-maskers will take it to that level. Oh, and that's how you see all these fights and anger between people who have masks and don't wear masks, and then it gets videotaped, and next thing you know, it's on the internet, right? So I really thought about that. It gives these anti-mask pro-maskers the ammunition to belittle anybody, and at the same time, those people, and it doesn't take many of them, are doing the bidding of the government. They're basically these unbadged police officers of the mask movement. But I started to think about that. I said, what if that sign said, "My mask protects me and your mask protects you"? No one would have any ammunition to do anything, because I'm responsible for myself. I'm responsible for my own health, my own life, and you're responsible for yours. And I can't sit there and say that you're killing Granny because you're not wearing your mask. If you're not wearing your mask, that's on you, and you're only killing yourself, and that's fine. And I kind of used the analogy of a motorcycle, wearing a motorcycle helmet. If you choose not to wear a motorcycle helmet, that's on you. And I don't have a problem with that. That's your choice. And if you get into an accident and kill yourself because you're not wearing a helmet, then hey, that was your choice, not anybody else's. It's nobody else's fault but yours.
I totally agree. And this is something that going through the understanding and knowledge and really breaking down what we believe in is why I don't believe libertarianism is the ultimate way, is because the whole concept of libertarianism is that don't bother me, I won't bother you. Mm-hmm. And so, it's the utopia idea of like, oh, everything's good. Well, the problem with it is that all of a sudden you have alcohol, which is legal, and someone gets behind a vehicle and starts driving, and now that drunk driver hit you or killed your family member or whatever it is. And so they're like, oh, we'll take, that person needs to be prosecuted, or, make drinking and driving illegal. Well, so you're okay with drinking and you're okay with driving, but the minute it impacts your life, you're not okay with it. Just like what you're saying about wearing a helmet with a motorcycle. So the concept is that it's okay as long as it doesn't infringe on me.
Mm-hmm.
So who's to say what is right and wrong then?
Yeah.
Right? Where is ethics versus legality versus morality? Where does that all intersect? And if people, there's so often in life, people are afraid to talk money, politics, and religion, which is ironic because those are the three things that drive us as humans more often than not.
Yeah.
And so having identity and knowing where you stand with the foundation is going to impact you, your family, and your community more than you'll ever know.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, Ryan, we could keep this podcast going forever. However, with that being said, is there any, final thoughts that you want to leave listeners with before we wrap this bad boy up?
Oh, gosh, that's ask me a specific question. I'm much better at those. I have a million things I could say, but
okay,
pulling one of those from my top of my head.
I love it. Well, let's go back to your dying with a gun in your hand. Where did you learn that freedom was more important than anything? Was that once you became in the military and joined, or was that just instilled in you as a child at a young age?
I think it happened over time. The military gave me that base, but I didn't think about it then. Like, you're young and you don't think about your freedoms and, what they mean to you when you're young. And then I got out, I became a business owner. And I think the first time that I really was able to put that concept into something tangible was when I read the book Atlas Shrugged. Atlas Shrugged was a book that put all of the thoughts that I had in my head that I couldn't actually speak into words. And it made me feel like, okay, now this is what I believe. Not everything, but so much of it was what I had already believed, but I didn't know. I couldn't get it out, but it just buried in there. And so that's when I started to really think about how what I thought about freedom and what I thought about America, and looking back a little bit on my military history and buds and everything like that to really formulate what was important in my life. And I have thought a lot about that. Freedom being way more important than safety, because ultimately, if we all are responsible for ourselves, all of our problems go away. I think about Ayn Rand saying basically the individual is the most what's the exact word? The individual is the biggest minority. And I know that might be offensive to some people in the minority, some people of color. I don't mean to be offensive. What I mean to say is that if we treated each other as individuals and not groups, we could get to where we want to be a lot faster. But unfortunately, in this country, we group people because it's politically expedient, and it's the division is like the lifeblood. It's the currency of politics. The hatred is the currency for politics. And so they don't really want that individualism. They want groupthink. And I think if we could break away from that and think of each other as individuals, not look at you or look at somebody by what gender they are, or what color they are, or anything like that, but just look at them for what they are as an individual, I think that would go a long way. So I thought a lot about that. I thought a lot, which spawns out to like, if you're an individual, if you think of people as individuals, you're also an individual, and you need to be responsible for yourself, and the things that happen to you are your responsibility. And all that. That's the way I live my life. That's the way I try to live my life, and that's the way I think that our society would be best going forward if we all thought that way. If we all thought freedom was the most important thing. The problem with freedom in our country is we've experienced it for so long that nobody knows what freedom, what the absence of freedom looks like, right, in this country. So we're just like, oh yeah, well let's try socialism. Like, let's try something different. Everybody's looking for something, for some significance in their life, right? And like, socialism sounds good, so let's do that because I'm trying to be significant. I don't know what to do. I'm young and stupid and dumb and ignorant, and I just want something to fill this void. And so they jump on board. The left is really good at recruiting the young.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just want to jump in there real quick. And you would not know good without evil. You would not know light without darkness. And so to have, you don't know what freedom is without oppression. And
Right.
It's so quick to forget why we are where we are today because of our past decisions and actions and all that. Now, one of the most loved Democrat presidents of all time, JFK Jr., who his assassination was yesterday, November 22nd, he said, one of his most famous quotes, "It's not what your country can do for you, but it's what you can do for your country." Meaning, it's not about government handouts. It's not about big government healthcare and all this different stuff. It is about what can you do to make yourself a better person and a better contributor to society. And that in whole ends up making America, our country, better and great. And
Right.
and it's
just a better way to live.
It's
a better way to live on an individual level too. Like, not what can I get for free, but what can I give, right? Like, that's the way to live, instead of trying to have this mentality that I'm the victim and these rich people are the bad people and they need to give to me because they probably got their money through some nefarious way. It's like, it's total bullcrap. Who cares about the rich? Like, just stop. Like, let the rich people do rich things, do your thing. Figure out how you become better. Stop focusing on other people. Stop focusing on the rich and how you can take the money out of their pocket and put it in the government coffers. Focus on you. Focus on one day at a time, getting better every day. And I think the people who have that mentality, most of them drift to the right, because the right is the party of personal responsibility, and I truly believe that. I think the left is the party of group identity, and group identity is good. Like, in individual battles, but you can't win the war that way. It's just these individual battles that they try to win. And a lot of times they win them, they win things with weapons. Like every time you have an idea, they come back with a weapon like saying you're racist, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a club that beats you down that you can't do much about. Even if you're right, it's a club that they use against you. So in some ways they win battles that way, but they can't win a war that way.
Yeah, I totally agree. And just real quick to wrap this bad boy up, I just want to share the concept of what a neighbor is. And, and this idea, we always talk about community. What are you surrounding yourself with? Well, when we talk about metropolitan areas and why they're like more often than not blue or Democrat constituents, people that live in apartment buildings don't typically know their neighbors. People that live in unincorporated or more in like a community-based setting, it doesn't matter whether or not you have a Joe Biden sign in your yard or a Trump sign in your yard or who you support or whatever. If I need support or if you need support and I'm your neighbor and you're my neighbor, that's who we have to go to. So once again, it's not about a right versus left, blue versus red. It really is on the content of your character.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not going to ask you for support if you are a person who's a total dick, right? I don't want to be around you if you're not a nice person or a friendly person. However, if you believe differently than me, but you're still kind and loving and willing, then we can do stuff together. We can build things and create a new world together. And so I think that it's very important to take care of yourself, love yourself, stand for yourself, know why you stand, and then from there, go out into the world.
Yeah.
Ryan, thank you so much for joining us on another episode of The Soulful Hunter. You and Graybo and all your different things that you got going on in this world, I bless you. I thank you. I used your gun stock on a hunt, or not just on a hunt, on a couple hunts, took an animal with it, loved it. And so all you listeners who do not know who Ryan McMillan is, it's time for you to go follow him on social media, on Instagram, on Twitter. We put the links in the bio for this. And just, go out there and be a positive contributor to society. But before you go out into this world, you need to identify what it is that you want and how you want this world to be. I'm Johnny Mack with The Soulful Hunter, everybody, and Ryan McMillan. Freedom on, and stay soulful. If you enjoyed today's podcast, I'd love it if you could go ahead and give this a rating as well as subscribe. Also, you can check us out on Instagram under the Soulful Hunter Podcast. Make sure to tag us in pictures and posts and use the hashtag Soulful Hunter. To find out more about the Soulful Hunter Podcast, go to soulfulhunter.com and be sure to follow the podcast as we are going to be bringing you a lot of great information, insight, and changing lives through primal adventure. I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. Stay tuned and stay soulful.